Okay. Good morning to everyone. It's Curt and welcome to another edition of Fire Law Roundup. We're starting off a little bit earlier than normal. Brad's got some commitments this afternoon, but we're gonna get our conference or our class in. And Brad, why don't you take us away with this week's cases?
Sure. Today is like discrimination day, it seems. And as all our viewers know, if you've been listening for a while, watching for a while, or reading your, Curt's blog for a while, discrimination is just that number one allegation that's just, for some reason, never going away. So because it's really we got 3 big discrimination cases and 2 others. I thought we could start in New Jersey just to get one out of the way. And it's interesting. This is in New Jersey, where a 13-year-old had passed away from a fire in the Franklin borough, New Jersey. This was in 21. The landlord did not inspect the house. Apparently, there was a faulty detector, and as a result of the fire, the young girl didn't get out. But the landlord pled guilty to a crime of that led to the reckless death, and he was sentenced to 5 years probation. So, as you might expect, now there's a lawsuit against him. Interestingly, however, because we're not here talking about landlord stuff, the fire department is also a named defendant in the lawsuit by the parents. And what they are alleged to have done is been intoxicated prior to the alarm. Now, this has got to be a tough case, but allegedly they were intoxicated and then responded, in the intoxicated manner. That I got to tell you, this is a hard one to prove. I mean, proving direct and proximate cause. 1, you got to prove they were actually intoxicated. How do you do that now? 2, how do you prove that, even assuming for the moment they were intoxicated, that they didn't fight the fire properly? And
I think there's a causation that connecting, because this is a wrongful death suit. It's not negligent firefighting. If I own a building and there's property damage, I could sue the fire department that I attribute to fire department negligence. I can sue them for negligence. This is a wrongful death suit. So they've got to prove that had the firefighters been sober, even assuming they could prove they were impaired, had the firefighters been sober, it would have made a difference in the outcome. And, the term we like to use is you can't just establish negligence in the air. You have to prove that the negligence caused the harm that you're looking at. And I agree with you. I think that even if they can prove the firefighters were impaired, I think they've got a tough case.
Tough.
What could cause it to go one way or the other? Maybe a video,
internal investigation,
visually impaired. So interesting case. One point on this one I'd make is I know over the years in many departments, there's been a practice that allows for parties at stations when someone is retiring or promoting or different things. And when you connect that type of even a party and causing on-duty units to be out of their normal response area and over at a station for a party or something like that. But when you couple it maybe with off-duty people drinking or whatever, what have you, which shouldn't be happening, but we know that it does happen. I know. And then you have a scenario like this. It's one of those things where you really got to think about, is a fireplace a good place to be having some sort of a party where you're going to pay tribute to somebody who's retiring? I think I've got this would be a scenario where I think it just brings to mind that this could be problematic for a fire department.
Well, look, there are so many, we could do a whole segment on this, so we won't derail ourselves, but there are so many bars and firehouses. I will be at one
or next to.
Yeah, no, I will be at 2 of them this week for clients. And, most of my downstate in New York, having bars in Western New York and downstate New York is still a big thing. And there are bars in the firehouses. And after the meetings, they go down and drink. And look, a lot of them are very good. They'll establish a duty crew, right? Who's not allowed to drink, who's on standby, that's very responsible. Some Don't do that. So alcohol in the firehouse is an antiquated idea. I don't know why we still think alcohol needs to be in the firehouse for people to want to hang out, but apparently that's what we do. And yeah, even worse is when you got somebody's pager on in a bar, the pager goes off and all the firefighters put down their drinks and run out. Like, okay, well, how many witnesses were to that? It's just bad in optics, right? Public optics are bad.
It's old school. And honestly, when I started in the 70s, we did that. And it's not when I say it's not the 1970s anymore,
Right.
So,
right. Okay, so just so we can keep the three discrimination cases together, because they juxtapose each other. Let's, if we could, jump to LA County. This is just one in a long line. I don't know whether you want to go through the reasoning, and you're probably better to do that, but this is a vaccine mandate suit. It's been dismissed along with every other one. There have been some very creative methods of trying to fight the vaccine mandate, such as by the ADA here, and nobody has been successful. I think these suits are mostly waning. I don't know whether you want to go into this or just leave it with...
Let me just connect a couple of dots with it. And you and I spoke, and I'm trying to think of when. It might have been 2 months ago, but there was another firefighter filed a vaccine challenge using the same theory. And the theory is that that they are being treated as if they had a disability. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act or under the state law equivalent. And they're saying that you're treating me like I have a defective immune system by mandating that I get this vaccine, and therefore you're discriminating against me about based on a perceived disability. So that was the theory going into this. And let me just comment on that particular connection between this and the previous case, okay? As I was reading this case, I said, oh, Brad and I just talked about that a couple of months ago. Is this the same case? And of course, oh no, I go back through my database and it's a different case. That's what led me, this type of occurrence is what led me to create my database, because I was starting to lose my mind, because I'd read a case, honestly, I go, oh, that's the one I already read. And then I'd go look it up and go, oh no, it's a different case. And then, oh no, there's a third case, a fourth case. So to kind of keep it clear in my mind, that's what led me to start the database. But this is very similar to the case that we talked about. And basically the court was having none of it. They said, no, that is not.
But very interesting reasoning here, right? But the reason they said it's not a disability is because they said, look, if you have COVID, and this is what I'm going to say is a little strange about the decision. If you have COVID, they're saying, look, this is transitory. It's not a disability. It lasts a couple of months, et cetera. Right. So there's no disability because a transitory illness or whatever is not a disability. But here you're perceiving me as susceptible to COVID because I haven't been vaccinated. So you're treating me as if I have a disability. This is kind of different. This is you don't have anything. You're just susceptible to a disability, to a disease, and could become a carrier, which is even less than a disability in my mind. I agree with the judge, almost but I have different reasoning.
The court went in a different direction, I think, on that. And in terms of saying, well, COVID isn't severe. Their allegation wasn't that COVID was severe. The allegation was that the perceived compromised immune system
is severe.
And that goes beyond just 6 months. What you're saying is person has a compromised immune system, therefore you need this vaccine. So who knows whether or not there's going to be an appeal. I think a lot of this stuff now is in our rearview mirror, and at least until the next great epidemic or.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have 3 cases, and I think the 3 cases are really interesting together because ultimately 2 of them, one is a suit that's been decided, and we'll start with FDNY. But then we have 2 other suits that we really want to compare with each other. But so now let's start with the FDNY in New York City. Obviously, we have the city who won a lawsuit. Now there's an appeal filed, but I'm sure they'll be successful there too. But the FDNY firefighter who has a history of lawsuits, right, here, and I think you refer back to them, He claims he was sexually assaulted, racially discriminated when he was assigned to his first firehouse after the fire academy. And, you know, the city, again, is just victorious. But isn't this, I think this is like the second or third suit that he has lost.
It's second that he's lost. He's got a couple of other pending. I believe I've got 4 cases with him. He's got 2 in state court, which you may have access to. My service with Lexus doesn't give me that access, but he's got 2 in state court. 1 recently filed. He put in for disability pension. Apparently that was denied, and so he's suing the city to get a disability pension. And then there's another one where he sued some of his coworkers. So total of 4 lawsuits. And
as opposed to the other 2, which we're going to jump to, but you know, this doesn't have to me a systemic issue of anything, right? The other 2 we're going to talk about are more systemic problems. This is just, I don't even know what to say because
I'll tell you, I think if the allegations are true, then there's a pretty serious problem. I think that's where we get to the factual part of it, and that's the part that we can comment the least on, because we just don't know. I've spoken to some people that say this is totally bogus, totally false, never happened. Who knows? But maybe it did, and if it did, there's a problem that needs to stop. And I think anybody who reads, if you read what the allegations are, I don't want to get into them here, but if you read what the allegations are, they're not acceptable. Absolutely, positively inappropriate, not acceptable under any circumstances. So question becomes, did they actually happen? And and if they did, you know.
You know, and I think the reason, you know, us reviewing these discrimination cases is, we'll jump to Iowa in a second, but the reason, and really kind of slow down our analysis here, is we want our viewers, especially the chiefs, you know, the higher ups, if you are watching this and you say, boy, that sounds like our department, I mean, you really got to be looking to see whether there's systemic issues of whether racism, sexism, harassment, discrimination, whatever. And you've got to really take a hard look, because if you don't, you're going to be on our show soon, right? As a defendant.
Brad, let me add one thing here. And this is like our good friend Billy Goldfeder does with line of duty deaths. Okay. When you have a line of duty death, or even a close call, what we want to do is we want to dissect what factors contributed to that line of duty death, or what led to this close call. And if we can identify them, maybe recognize that our department is doing some of those things, we can get that to stop. Okay. We're applying the same methodology here, but we're looking at litigation. And I think that it's the appropriate way of doing it. And we're certainly not trying to embarrass people or second guess decisions, but by looking at it this way, what we're trying to do is help other fire departments prevent this type of lawsuit or problem from occurring in their own department.
Right. And look, none of this may be true, right? It is certainly, it's the 2 we're going to get to, right, are just lawsuits, but they're damning enough. And these 2 are such good examples of where you don't want to be, because it's not one allegation that somebody made a comment, right? Here, like as we switch to Iowa, you're going to see so many allegations, and it's not one incident. And so you've got to, when you start layering on the bricks and building this wall, or, you know, this case of discrimination allegations, you start realizing, wow, that's a lot of different incidents. Maybe this really is true. So you start looking guilty to your community. And look, nobody wants to call a fire department that appears racist or sexist or harassing, right? So this is a public safety issue. Very much like when the African-American community says, boy, we have police who are racist or whatever, they don't want to call the police, or they don't trust the police. This is the same thing. This is, I won't get off this topic, but when you talk about posting symbols of hate, you know, when you allow your firefighters to make racist comments, all of a sudden your department is perceived in a certain way. and it affects public safety because people don't want to call you. So this stuff does matter. If you can't solve it internally, think of it from the community perspective. And when these lawsuits hit, you know, and you cite right to the news stories, these are all over the place, right? You're not hiding this. So let's give you this example. Let's start with Iowa. And these two cases really are very interesting. But Iowa, we have an Iowa City firefighter. She's been on leave since 21. She's filed suit now. She alleges sexual harassment, gender discrimination, and retaliation. And again, this isn't a short list of incidents, right? And she claims
I didn't include all of them. I know I listed, I went way beyond what I normally do. I did not list all of the allegations. There are other allegations beyond that.
Yeah, it's, you know, and again, look, we don't assume guilt. We don't assume innocence. You and I don't assume anything. We're just reciting the allegations, right? So we're not saying anyone's right or wrong here on either side. It just looks bad again. So here, the firefighter's name is last name, I think, Sadie. She
that's her first name. That's her
first name. Oh, okay.
Yeah, McDowell is her last name.
Very good. Sorry. Apologize for her. So she is, you know, the complaint alleges, hey, she's been a great firefighter, been a great employee. Her protected class listed would be first female and that she is lesbian by her own admission. And there is this whole environment. So I'm just going to read some of these as to give the viewers the flavor of what the allegations here. And if any of these sound familiar in your firehouse, stop it now, right? Training, correcting, policies, whatever, stop it. So here's some of the examples to show you what she's allegedly been dealing with. So first, and I could see this, she, you know, one fire officer told her allegedly, again, I'm not going to keep saying allegedly, but just accept that allegedly comes before every allegation. A fire officer told her that some of the guys were uncomfortable working with her because they don't want to make a joke or say something that would get them fired. Look, if that's true, you don't need to say it. Just don't say these things. She alleges that during the first year of her employment, someone came into the women's bathroom and took her pants. Now, here's the interesting thing. They would probably do that because I'm sure I've done that to a male, right? I mean, this is firehouse pranks. And the problem to our viewers, you got to understand, is courts don't look at things as firehouse pranks necessarily. I remember a case where somebody hung a noose, a monkey and a noose, and said, oh, it was just a joke towards our new black employee. That's not, you know, you take someone's pants, one, you're interfering with their ability to work, and you may think it's funny, but it's not going to be perceived that way. So firehouse pranks and jokes need to stop. We could do a great series on that alone. In any event, she claims that men entered and used the bathrooms designed for women. If we stopped here, she'd probably lose, but we don't stop here. Then apparently the other female members complained about men going into the women's bathroom, and someone who's an officer apparently calls her a bitch. Allegedly, she suffered a work-related knee injury. Now, this part, you've got to chime in with me because I got to tell you, this part I'm a little confused about the allegation. She claimed she was required to work light duty, whereas other men were expected to work fewer hours or none at all. Mm-hmm. Usually this is flipped, that you denied me light duty and other people were granted it. So I'm a little confused why she's saying she was granted light duty and that she's being discriminated against.
My guess when I read that, and again, you know, each of us were applying our own knowledge to some of this to fill in some of the gaps here. But, you know, some people are very well liked, and they have a dentist appointment in the afternoon. They're supposed to work light duty from 9 to 4 or whatever. Usually they don't want light duty to go over 35, 40 hours or whatever. So they'll work 8 to 4, 9 to 4, whatever it may be. They got a dentist appointment. Okay, go ahead, leave at 2 o'clock. You're just on light duty. It's not like you're not staffing the trucks, so go ahead and leave early. Oh, I've got a golf date, your tea time at 2. Can I leave? Yeah. Okay. So that was what resonated with me, was maybe that there was something like some of the guys were allowed to leave early, and she was not. Now, again, she didn't get into the details. We don't know if she ever asked if she could leave early. That's, if it's routinely permitted. So at any rate, that's how I interpreted that.
And now I want to switch to the next group of allegations she makes. And listen, before I get a bunch of, or you get a bunch of hate mail for something I say, I'm going to say this and I want to qualify it. So I want to talk about these comments that are made, but my precursor comment to that is I can see how men would think they would be endearing themselves to a woman who is either lesbian, bisexual, etc., right? They share an interest in women in common and would think they're befriending someone by making these following comments. And I am not accepting the comments. I just see the mentality of men thinking, oh, we're going to endear ourselves to this female because we're both going to talk about women. We're both right. We're going to make derogatory comments, but you can participate in our derogatory comments. So
we don't want to get banned by YouTube. So don't use any of the actual words that were used in the
okay. Fair. So here's what they're doing is they're goggling over women they see. I won't even give you the examples, but I encourage the viewers to become a reader or go read this case in Iowa, because you've got to see what they said. But basically they're driving along and like, hey, that woman's hot, this woman's hot. And I'm so watering this comments down. But it looks to me like they're trying to endear themselves to this woman who, again, identifies she's openly a lesbian. And so it seems like they're trying to make these horribly derogatory comments about women to, I'm guessing, to endear themselves. And Amen, it's not endearing, it's harassing. And it's inappropriate. And there's an officer in the vehicle when these things are happening. Stop it. But and you're right. Unfortunately, I can't make a lot of these comments, although they're talking about, they refer to people as sluts and they make comments about them in their outfits. It's just, but the problem is senior firefighters are hearing these, allegedly a lieutenant, a captain, a battalion chief, and allegedly no one's stopping this. So we really need to be training our lieutenants, captains, everybody that you hear it, you stop it. I don't even care if I don't care about anything. Just stop it. You have to stop it. It should never, the word should come out of someone's mouth and immediately should be, you're done. You're not making these comments, but there's a whole.
Right, let me just interject here, because this is where, and I'm going to say something that's going to be a little controversial. If you've heard me speak before, it's nothing new here, but we have a sort of a locker room mentality in most, my opinion, most fire departments. Okay. And as long as that locker room mentality persists, we're going to be at risk for sexual harassment lawsuits that are not meritorious. And what I mean by that, now, please don't misunderstand what I'm about to say, because I'm not saying this is a non-meritorious lawsuit, okay? But let's assume that we have a non-meritorious plaintiff, okay? Let's say we have a female who is incompetent. She should not be a firefighter. She doesn't have the strength. She doesn't have the aptitude. She just is a lousy employee. And she can point to all of this stuff going on in the workplace. As long as she can point to all this stuff going on in the workplace, when we go to dismiss this employee, she's going to prevail in a sexual harassment lawsuit because this stuff is going on. Right. And it's got nothing to do with her competency. It's got nothing to do with all of her faults. It's got to do with what is going on in the background. We have to clean up the workplace, as painful as that is going to be, because as long as this is going on, non-meritorious lawsuits are going to prevail. We have to clean this up so that it becomes very clear that when someone is incompetent or whatever their issue may be, that the department can move after them. But as long as this kind of stuff is going on, it makes it impossible for the department to wrestle with people who don't have the aptitude, don't have the skills, or whatever it is to be a good firefighter. And again, I want to clarify again, I'm not talking about this case. I have no idea about this person or anyone involved in this case. But as long as that locker room mentality persists, we're not going to be able to deal with people who are in protected classes who are incompetent. And that's my concern. So
right.
I defer to you.
No, you're right. Look, if we cleaned up all of these discrimination suits, our video show would be like 15 minutes
we could
long.
talk about fires. We could actually talk about fires.
Right.
Yeah.
I just, but you're right. You're not doing yourself any favor by giving somebody an out to defend themselves, right? Saying, yeah, I'm not a bad firefighter. You're just an ism or an ist, right. Or a sexist, racist,
look at all
whatever.
the stuff that's going on all around me.
Yeah.
So, and I know what I just said is not easy. I don't mean to say you just, wave a magic wand and suddenly we have a workplace that is like where my wife works, like a high school, where you can't use this kind of language or you get fired. But at any rate.
By the way, I think it is easy. I think, and look, when I was chief, I made it very clear. You will not talk like that. You will not tolerate it. If you're an officer and you tolerate it, you won't be an officer. It ends. I've lost some friends doing that. So, and I know it's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. You have to. And listen, if you love the department, then end it. If you love the fire department, if you love your fire department, end this stuff, because you're going to ruin the reputation, whether it's true or not. So the Iowa one, look, we can talk about it for hours on the allegations. We're going to have to see. My bet is it probably settles. These are a lot of allegations which occurred over what I think she said 10 years.
Yeah, she was not a rookie. She was not a rookie.
No, I think this is a decade long, which is really the problem, because over a decade, if you haven't solved these issues, two things happen. One is you're handing someone a decade's worth of information. And by the way, people take notes when things happen, right?
And they record.
Yeah. And now you're handing them a lawsuit basically that says this department, this city, this employer has a policy of tolerating, right? And effectively an unwritten policy of tolerating harassing, discriminatory, sexist conduct. If this is going on over 10 years, stop it now, right? You really do have a problem. Okay, so now we jump over. This is way more complicated, way more, not more interesting, but very interesting. We're going to go to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., it's not a similar case, but it's for African-American women firefighters have filed a race and gender discrimination suit. They're seeking $10 million. Why not, right? But this suit, I find, is super interesting because DC, which again surprises me, but DC has an order, as many paid fire departments, Boston, city of Syracuse, right? There's a lot of consent decrees where they have to make the population of the fire department of African Americans the same as that in their city. Did I say that correctly? Basically. So the DC was under a consent decree, and they already had to bring the number of African American firefighters up to a certain level. That's where I thought we were going in this, but it's not. These are for African-American women firefighters. And just to summarize, they allege that they were denied benefits of being a paramedic and being in certain divisions. They were denied benefits that were available to men. I'm not so sure whether this is a race or a gender issue necessarily. They combine the two of them, and I think there are benefits and negatives of doing that I'll discuss. But basically, they said, look, we got paramedics, but we're not in the EMS division. We were moved over to another division, and we weren't paid the higher rate of being a paramedic. And what they do is very good lawyering, I think. They said, listen, there are 4 divisions, I think, in DC, and in the EMS division, you get extra pay when you're a paramedic. And this is just one of their claims, but I think it's a big one. And they said we were assigned to this other division and we weren't given that extra pay to be a paramedic. Yet we're still assigned to on overtime to EMS, et cetera. And we still have to keep up our paramedic if we want that extra pay, but we don't get the extra pay. And what they do, which is very damning, is they say in another area, I think the fire investigation division, I could be wrong on that, but they said in another division, which is not the EMS division, paid paramedics are given their increase and we are treated differently, not giving that increase. So this is going to switch, right? I think they pretty much made a prima facie case of race and or gender or both discrimination. And what's interesting here is they seem to claim both together because they said, yeah, look, there are other women who may be not discriminated against or other African-Americans who are not discriminated against. But when you put the two together, African-American women, we are being discriminated against. Interesting claim. And the way I read it, it kind of takes two of these together in some cases. But what they do, which is damning, is so when we did this, was it 2 weeks ago? We talked a lot about the burden shifting. So here, I think they've made, based on their allegations, a prima facie case of discrimination because they pointed then to a similarly situated situation where they were being treated worse than. And the DC will now have to come back and explain why in these two non-EMS divisions, they treat people differently and justify why these 4 African-American firefighter women are treated differently in terms of their paramedic pay. There are other allegations. That's the one I really focus on. But again, it's significant. And you have to imagine in DC, which is a very racially harmonious, I think, area. I mean, it's certainly, heavily populated with various minorities, and the fire department's pretty racially integrated now. It
has been the last, couple of decades. Yeah.
Yeah. So I say these, I don't mean to offend anyone. It's tough to imagine that this was intentional, but on the other hand, it's a fire department. It's not tough to imagine anything. But this one I find really interesting because it's not comments, it's practices, right? And practices, I think, are probably easier to defend, but still it's one of those, hey, you have a history of discriminating against a certain class of people, in this case, a double class, race and gender. So I don't know. I found this very interesting. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch to see whether they can justify their just, and I don't mean racial discrimination, but why they treat people in two different divisions with the same certification, why they pay them differently. Was it based on, well, yeah, we don't care whether you're a paramedic when you're in this division and we want you in the fire investigation unit to be a paramedic? I don't know. Based on how the complaints are in, I have a hard time justifying it, but I'm sure DC has a reason, whether it's a legitimate reason or not, who knows?
Well, I've been putting together the blog that covers, firefighters, even internationally, but mostly in the United States. But I almost think there's a handful of fire departments that could have their own fire law blog just about the lawsuits in their fire department. DC is one of them, Fdny, San Francisco's another one. You could have a firefighter attorney just focus on litigation within one particular fire department. It's amazing, but DC seems to be a hotbed for that. And this is just another in a long line of cases out of DC, and the complaint lists several of them. And I've got probably about 100 cases from DC in my database. So there's no shortage of them.
I'm a big fan of surveying your firefighters. You don't have to wait till you receive a complaint about a discriminatory practice. You should, and I'm going to tell you why, you will know, but I'll tell our viewers why I'm suggesting this. So one of the lawsuits that can be under the federal constitution that can be a basis and is a basis for many of these lawsuits. One of the allegations that you have a history of maintaining this discriminatory practice, right? Mm-hmm. And what they do is they say, I've been here 10 years and this has been going on, and despite complaints, it's never solved, right? And so and they show that the people in charge tolerated or encouraged this, and they were aware of it, and they never did anything to stop this practice. And it's hard to prove, but it's not hard to prove. So the way you stop that very common claim is to survey your members, all of your members, and ask them about, do you think we are discriminatory, retaliatory? Do you think there are any unfair labor practices that we have? And at least bring them to light and investigate them. If you have done that, you will probably break the chain, depending on what you do after, but you probably break the chain of, hey, we turned a blind eye, or we have a policy or an unwritten policy of allowing this, because now you're asking, you're investigating, you're looking to what you could do about it. It's an important factor that stops this. I would be surveying. I wouldn't be, by the way, I wouldn't have, hey, Lieutenant Jones, go make up a survey, right? I'd be spending some real money on these surveys. We could probably put together, it would take hundreds of hours to put together a fair, neutral survey. And right, we talked about creating civil service exams, how hard that is. This is just the same. But that survey would be really critical to taking a deep look into your department to see what complaints people have and what views they have. But at least if you do nothing, you lose, right? You're probably in a lot of trouble. But if it opens your eyes and you can now say, God, I didn't realize our lieutenants were allowing that conversation in the truck to happen, we're going to focus on it. Surveys are critical. Just don't, again, create your own. Have your HR and your lawyer and whatever spend a lot of time creating it, but you got to ask the question, right? How's our environment? And if you do that, you're protecting the department.
Well said.
So that's really my end suggestion on these.
Yeah, I know. And you've got to get to Long Island, right?
I do.
For your meetings.
On the road again.
Yeah, so we're gonna wrap it up here, but please, if you haven't already, please subscribe. If you like what you hear, please click like as well. We're up to somewhere around 525 subscribers, and our next plateau is 1,000. So please help us out. We want to keep doing this. We need to get up to 1,000. That's the next one. So we appreciate your support. Okay, and